Tran was born into a poor family in the Mekong Delta, where most people made a living through farming. His childhood was filled with vast rice fields and endless waterways, but also with days of hardship and scarcity. His family had many children, and despite working from dawn to dusk, his parents could barely make ends meet. For Tran, owning a new pair of shoes was a luxury. He often wore worn-out sandals, sometimes stitched multiple times just to keep them usable. Despite the poverty, Tran had a burning desire to change his life. He didn't want to remain trapped in the cycle of poverty like his parents. Every time he saw beautiful shoes displayed in stores during his rare visits to the district market, he dreamed of making durable and stylish shoes that anyone could afford. This simple dream ignited his determination to escape poverty and rise above his circumstances. Education was not easy for Tran. He had to balance school with helping his family. However, at the age of 18, he made a life-changing decision: to leave his hometown and move to Saigon in search of opportunities. He believed that as long as he worked hard and stayed persistent, he would eventually succeed. With an old backpack, a few sets of clothes, and a small amount of money his mother had saved for him, Tran embarked on a journey filled with challenges but also hope. Stepping off the bus in Saigon, Tran had nothing except for a small sum of money that could last him only a few days. The city was glamorous but also harsh for someone like him. No degree, no experience, and no connections. At first, he took whatever jobs he could find, working as a construction laborer, a restaurant helper, and doing odd jobs just to survive. He worked from early morning until late at night, barely making enough to pay rent and afford a simple meal. However, fate took a turn when Tran got a job at a small shoe factory. Initially, he was assigned only minor tasks like cleaning and carrying materials. But instead of feeling discouraged, he closely observed how the shoemakers worked. He noticed that every step, from cutting leather, stitching soles, to applying glue, required precision and skill. After a few months, Tran took the initiative to fix a defective pair of shoes. Though his skills were still unpolished, his persistence caught the attention of the factory owner. One day, the owner handed him a faulty pair of shoes and said, "If you can fix these, I'll let you learn the trade." It was the first real opportunity of his life, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. That night, Tran brought the damaged shoes back to his tiny rented room and stayed up all night trying to repair them. He didn't have professional tools, just a small knife and some glue, but he patiently experimented, trying different methods. By morning, he returned the shoes to the factory. The owner inspected them carefully before nodding in approval. "Not bad. From now on, you can train with the senior shoemakers." Now given the chance to learn, Tran didn't waste a single second. He worked harder than ever, paying close attention to every detail in the shoemaking process. During the day, he learned from the experienced workers. At night, he practiced with leftover leather scraps. Within a year, he could craft a complete pair of shoes by himself. But mastering the craft was only the beginning. Tran realized that being a good shoemaker wasn't enough. He needed to understand management, sourcing materials, and how to sell products. During lunch breaks, he often listened to the factory owner discussing business deals with clients, absorbing every detail. Gradually, a vision formed in his mind. One day, he would own his own shoe factory. After 3 years, Tran had become one of the best shoemakers at the factory. But he wasn't satisfied with just being a skilled worker. Every day, he observed how the factory was managed, how materials were sourced, how production was organized, and how deals were made with customers. One key realization struck him. The difference between a small workshop and a major business was market control. While his factory mainly produced low-cost shoes for local markets, large companies secured export contracts and earned far greater profits. Determined to learn more about the industry, Tran started networking. Whenever he delivered goods, he talked to customers and inquired about shoe trends and common market problems. He discovered that many people wanted affordable yet high-quality shoes, something the Vietnamese market lacked at the time. Despite having a stable job, Tran knew that if he truly wanted to change his life, he had to step out and start his own business. After 5 years at the shoe factory, Tran felt ready to take the leap. With his savings and a 50 million VND loan from a friend, he started his own small shoe workshop. At this point, he could only afford a cramped rental space in the city outskirts, a few old sewing machines, and 4 workers. His initial goal was simple: produce low-cost shoes to sell at wholesale markets. The early days were incredibly tough. Tran was not only the boss but also the main worker. He did everything from cutting leather, gluing soles, quality checking, to personally delivering orders. He woke up at 5 a.m. and worked past midnight, often skipping meals just to keep up with production. Although his shoes were competitively priced, they lacked brand recognition, making sales difficult. Some days he sat in the market for hours, waiting for a single customer to try his shoes. However, Tran refused to give up. He knew that success depended on product quality. He spent extra time researching and experimenting with techniques to make his shoes more durable and stylish. The first few batches sold with little profit, but gradually, customers started returning with more orders. Within 6 months, his workshop had secured steady sales, enough to sustain operations. But Tran had no intention of stopping there. One day, while inspecting his products in the workshop, a foreign businessman named Marco walked in. Marco specialized in exporting Vietnamese shoes to Europe and had heard about Tran's workshop through a mutual contact. Excited, Tran eagerly showcased his best designs. Marco picked up a pair, examined the leather, checked the stitching, and finally nodded. "I'll place a trial order of 1,000 pairs. If they meet my standards, we'll establish a long-term partnership." This was the biggest opportunity Tran had ever encountered, but also the greatest challenge. Exporting required much higher quality standards than local sales. Even the smallest defect could lead to the order being rejected. Yet, without hesitation, Tran invested all his savings into upgrading materials, improving production, and hiring more workers. His entire workshop worked tirelessly to meet the deadline. When the order was finally shipped, Tran personally checked each pair to ensure perfection. But then, disaster struck. A message arrived saying that 30% of the shipment had been rejected due to technical defects. This wasn't just a financial loss, it threatened the reputation of his workshop. If he couldn't resolve the issue, his export dream might end before it even began. Upon receiving news that the shipment had been returned, Tran was stunned. This was his first export order. If it failed, the door to the global market might slam shut before him. But there was no time for panic. He immediately contacted Marco to find out the reason. It turned out that the problem wasn't with the material or design, but rather with the adhesive. Some shoes had weak glue bonding, causing the soles to detach under strong pressure. Tran quickly gathered the entire factory team to find a solution. He analyzed every step of the production process and discovered that the issue arose from using a cheaper glue he had purchased to cut costs. Without hesitation, Tran decided to take full responsibility. He recalled all defective shoes, repaired them, and resent the shipment to Marco at no extra charge. This decision resulted in a significant financial loss for the factory, but he believed it was the only way to maintain credibility. Marco was impressed by Tran's handling of the situation. Instead of terminating their partnership, he offered Tran another chance. This time, Tran didn't dare to make any mistakes. He invested in high-quality adhesive and implemented stricter quality control measures. When the new shipment was sent out, he anxiously awaited feedback. A week later, an email from Marco arrived. "Good quality. We can do long-term business." Tran let out a sigh of relief. His factory had officially entered the export market. After successfully completing the first order, Marco continued placing larger orders. However, this presented a new challenge. Tran's factory lacked the capacity to meet the growing demand. Without expansion, he would have to decline lucrative deals. Determined not to miss the opportunity, Tran decided to scale up. But this time, the required investment amounted to billions of dong, money he didn't have. Unwilling to take out high-interest bank loans, he explored another option: seeking investors. He developed a detailed business plan, demonstrating the potential of the footwear export market, and convinced an industry acquaintance to invest. After multiple negotiations, Tran secured a 5 billion dong investment to expand production. With the funding, he leased a larger facility, purchased modern machinery, and hired additional workers. The new factory had 5 times the production capacity of the old one, allowing Tran to fulfill export orders more efficiently. Within 2 years, the factory's revenue quadrupled. Tran's made-in-Vietnam shoes were no longer just in Europe, but had also expanded to the US and Japan. From a small workshop with just 4 workers, Tran now owned a company with hundreds of employees and products reaching markets worldwide. After years of manufacturing for foreign brands, Tran realized a harsh truth. Although his revenue was high, the largest share of profits always belonged to the brands he was producing for. If he continued this way, his factory would forever remain in the shadows. Why not create his own shoe brand? It was a bold but daunting idea. Instead of focusing solely on production, Tran now had to consider design, marketing, and distribution. However, he knew that if he succeeded, the value of his company would multiply. He began by researching the market and global footwear trends. Instead of competing with major brands, he chose a niche: premium leather shoes for young professionals. He hired professional shoe designers, invested in branding and packaging, and developed a structured marketing strategy. After a year of preparation, Tran's first shoe brand was officially launched. Initially, sales were slow because customers were unfamiliar with the new brand. However, thanks to superior quality and a well-planned marketing campaign, sales gradually increased. Within 3 years, his brand was available on major e-commerce platforms and had stores in shopping malls. Tran's factory, once just a contract manufacturer, had now secured a solid position in the market. But this was only the beginning. After 3 years of developing his own shoe brand, Tran had built a strong presence in the domestic market. However, the fashion industry was fiercely competitive. Established brands had financial strength, aggressive marketing, and extensive distribution networks. Without a breakthrough strategy, Tran's brand could easily be overshadowed. He began looking for ways to differentiate. Observing consumer trends, he noticed a growing demand for sustainability. Leveraging his production expertise, Tran decided to invest in a premium eco-friendly footwear line, using recycled leather, natural rubber soles, and low-emission manufacturing processes. This shift wasn't easy. Sustainable materials were more expensive, and many customers were still unfamiliar with green fashion. But Tran remained steadfast. He collaborated with eco-conscious influencers and lifestyle bloggers to promote the concept. Marketing campaigns emphasizing each pair of shoes is a step toward a greener future quickly gained traction. After a year, Tran's sustainable footwear line gained popularity not only in Vietnam but also attracted foreign distributors. Fashion retailers in South Korea and Singapore began trial orders, signaling the beginning of international expansion. When Tran received his first international brand orders, he knew this was his moment to elevate the business. However, international markets had far stricter standards. Failure to meet them could jeopardize his brand's reputation. He upgraded his production systems, obtaining international quality certifications like ISO 9001 and LEED environmental certification. He also invested in cutting-edge manufacturing technology, improving quality while reducing costs to maintain a competitive price. Tran's efforts paid off. Export orders increased, and his brand's shoes were soon stocked in stores across Tokyo, Seoul, and Paris. The breakthrough came when an international fashion magazine hailed his brand as Asia's new symbol of sustainable footwear. Sales skyrocketed beyond expectations. At this stage, Tran was no longer just a shoemaker or a contract manufacturer. He had become the CEO of a globally recognized brand, proving that Vietnamese-made products could thrive on the international stage. But instead of resting on his success, he asked himself, how can I sustain this growth and create even greater value? After more than 20 years in the footwear industry, Tran reflected on his journey with pride. From a factory worker in a small shoe workshop, he had built a globally recognized brand, creating thousands of jobs for Vietnamese workers. However, to him, success wasn't just about revenue or profit. It was about the impact he could leave behind. Tran shifted his focus to education and mentorship. He founded a footwear design and manufacturing academy, providing young, aspiring designers with the skills to enter the industry. He also launched initiatives to support traditional craft villages, helping artisans access modern markets without losing their cultural identity. His brand continued growing, but he no longer chased growth at all costs. Instead, he prioritized sustainable development, innovation, and ethical production. To Tran, his dream was no longer just about building a successful shoe brand. It was about changing how the world viewed Vietnam's footwear industry. Today, when stepping into a fashion store in New York or London and seeing shoes bearing his name, Tran no longer feels personal pride. Instead, he thinks about the thousands of Vietnamese workers who helped turn this dream into reality. And he knows the journey is far from over. Thank you for listening patiently up to this point, and I would like to congratulate you on your listening, comprehension, and vocabulary skills improving every day. Along with that, your ability to concentrate has been and will gradually take shape. All the necessary abilities to succeed, whether in study or work, are thoroughly explored in each video I post. I wish you happy studying, and see you in the next videos.